Hello, it's Daniel Rosney, here again to learn more about the monarchs that reign over more than 40 countries in the world. If you haven't worked it out by now, they're all men, and there isn't one monarchy system that fits all of those men. There are kings, there's an emperor, there's a grand duke, and there are sultans and emirs. And we've looked at, on the series, absolute monarchs, those who have total power, and we've also looked at constitutional ones, where the power is shared with a government, more often than not a democratically elected one. And in this episode, we're going to look at what it's like when an absolute monarchy becomes a constitutional one. What is that change like when democracy is embraced and the population has a say? And to help us with that is a Prime Minister who'll give us a better understanding of how those two figures, an elected politician and a monarch, a hereditary head of state, work together, as we look at King Jigme Khesar Namgyel Wangchuck of Bhutan. For this edition of It's Raining Men, I'm going to take you to East Asia, to the Himalayas with high mountain ranges and deep valleys. More than 70% of this country is covered with forest, and the elevation is varied across the nation, with some parts just 160 meters above sea level, whereas other parts are more than 7,500 meters high, creating different climates for such a small place. Bhutan is a tiny Buddhist kingdom that borders two giants on the world stage, China in the north and India to the south, east and west. It's slightly larger than Belgium, and it's almost a hidden gem tucked away from mass tourism and overexposure, with the first foreign tourists only let in 1974. By choice, it cut itself off from most of the world for centuries in order to protect its unique culture, with television not arriving there until 1999. It's said to have the only capital city on the planet that doesn't have traffic lights. There are elements to the place that are like nowhere else, but there are similarities. For example, the monarchy, seen as a unifying symbol for the country. Jigme Khesar Namgyel Wangchuck has been on the throne since 2006. And kings there are sometimes referred to as dragon kings, as the country's name in Yonka, the official language, is Land of the Thunder Dragon. Although for thousands of years people have lived in Bhutan, it's only been a kingdom with a monarch for a little more than 100 years. And less than 20 years ago, it became a democracy, which was a huge change for the country. And to help us explore that is the current Prime Minister of Bhutan, Tshering Tobgay, who has been in office since last January. He was also previously PM between 2013 and 2018. Prime Minister, thank you very much for joining me on It's Raining Men.
Thank you for having me, Daniel. It's a pleasure.
We've spoken about other monarchies from other nations on the series, and in the last episode, we spoke about Japan, which claims to have the oldest monarchy in the world, dating back more than 2,600 years. But in the monarchy of Bhutan, we're on the fifth king. So can you give us a bit of a brief history lesson into how a monarchy was established in the 20th century? Because that was during a period where a lot of monarchies were being abolished, especially in Europe.
117 years ago, 1907, 17 December, representatives of the people and the monk body congregated and elected a hereditary monarch. So our monarchy was actually elected by the people. This was in 1907. Exactly 100 years later, in 2007, this elected absolute monarchy handed back power to the people by imposing democracy.
And what was that like, going from an absolute monarchy to a democracy? You're in a unique position because you are now the Prime Minister, but you would have lived in Bhutan at a time where you wouldn't have been able to have had that role.
We were very anxious. We were enjoying a period of unprecedented peace, stability, and prosperity. The entire country had unreserved, unconditional love and affection for our monarch, trust and confidence in our monarch. And for the monarch to say that we are now going to have a democracy, we couldn't understand the logic behind this. We were not just proud of our monarchs, we were happy and content with life in Bhutan. And then for our father figure, or our king, to say that we have to have democracy, multi-party democracy, our people, we the people, didn't accept that. We accepted it only because it came as a command and as a repeated command from His Majesty the King.
And then he chose to relinquish the throne.
His Majesty the fourth King started the process of drafting a constitution. Our constitution took like 5 years to draft, by the way. We consulted many constitutions from many parts of the world, and we came up with our constitution. And the constitution outlines our monarchy now. Obviously, it talks about democracy and multi-party democracy. And so the constitution was the basis of the first elections. Now first we were confused and then very anxious. And His Majesty the King, in imposing democracy, was very careful. He decentralized power from the center and the throne to the people. He empowered the people and gave them the responsibility of self-governance. His Majesty trained us in the electoral process. We actually had mock elections. We had 3 rounds of mock elections where every citizen took part in the electoral process for dummy parties and dummy people. They were just dummies, so that we understand what our rights are going to be, but what our responsibilities are also. And then only we had our first elections. It was at about that time that His Majesty the Fourth King, he ruled from 1972 till 2006, or 34 years. And at the right age of 51 years, he was only 51 when he abdicated the throne, and he relinquished the golden throne to his crown prince, the 5th King of Bhutan.
And the 5th king has been king since then, and at the time, he was the youngest monarch in the world. Under the new constitution, what kind of role and responsibilities does he have? Is it similar to the system that we're used to in the UK, where the Prime Minister advises the king on what he should say, where he should visit? Is that the role that you have as a Prime Minister?
I seek advice from His Majesty the King. I seek counsel from His Majesty the King. And our democracy is flourishing. We've had 4 elections, and in those 4 elections, we've seen 4 changes in government. In spite of that, there is continuity in terms of policy and vision. And a lot of this is because of the constancy of our king, of the royal vision that he provides, the counsel that he provides to all arms of the government. So I seek his counsel. And you may have noticed, I wear a small portrait here. Every Bhutanese wears a portrait of His Majesty the King. I wear a portrait here as my conscience, to do what's right for our country and our people. Not just to do what's right now, but to do what's right for the future. I tell my colleagues in our political party, in government, and the other political parties, as politicians, we can see only as far as the end of our tenure. And our people know that His Majesty's, the King's vision transcends different governments way into the future. In fact, his vision, if you were to put a timeline, must be till he relinquishes his throne to the crown prince.
And will that happen then? Is it likely that the trend has been set, I guess, by his father, that the King of Bhutan will relinquish his throne at some point rather than serving in the position for life?
Our constitution requires kings abdicate when they reach 65. We have a cutoff age. This was hotly contested by the people during the drafting of the constitution. But His Majesty the King insisted that this provision be put.
So this was the previous king, this was the 4th king that insisted this?
He made it very clear. He said, when I get old, if I am of no use to myself, how can I be of use to the country? And therefore you must have a retirement age for the king. And he insisted that the provision was maintained. 65. But like I said, he abdicated when he was 51. By constitution, our current king will rule until he's 65.
I guess critics could argue that when you're developing a democracy and you create democratically elected prime ministers like yourself, but you retain a monarchy instead of creating a democratically elected president as head of state, why did Bhutan choose to keep its relatively new monarchy?
You may consider it new. For us, our monarchy is so old that we celebrate it for several generations, and our monarchy is in our very DNA. So what you consider new, for us, it has been a fact of life. Our monarchy has been the bedrock of our hopes, our aspirations, our futures. We wanted an absolute monarch to continue. To even conceive of sidelining a monarch totally by not having a constitutional monarch and having an elected president was inconceivable. I mean, this is the first time I'm thinking about it since you mentioned it. Inconceivable. We've been blessed with enlightened monarchs.
And that change with a democracy brought with it the fifth king. And you say that he is now your advisor and you go to him for counsel. But when it comes to the governance of the country, do you have weekly meetings with him? Do you share what is discussed in cabinet, what is discussed in parliament? Does he have any influence in the lawmaking of the country?
His Majesty is a part of the parliament. Our parliament has the upper house, lower house, and His Majesty the King. And His Majesty the King does not intervene actively. He will address the parliament once in a while, during which time he will articulate his royal vision. But otherwise, lawmaking is up to us. Similarly, every national day, on our national day, His Majesty the King, our fifth king, King Jigme, he articulates his royal vision. And it is up to us to draw inspiration from the royal vision and articulate that into policy. He does not insist that any of his royal vision is accepted as policy, but that's up to us. The people will not have it any other way. People require us to take the royal vision absolutely seriously. Day-to-day governance, we are not required to report on any time frame to His Majesty the King. By constitution, I'm required to report on the state of the country once a year to the Parliament and His Majesty the King. But whenever I have doubts, whenever I have misgivings, I go directly to His Majesty the King and seek his counsel. No issue has been too small for him not to give his attention. Every issue that I have presented to His Majesty the King, His Majesty the King will give me his counsel. So I'm very fortunate. I can serve as a Prime Minister with confidence, knowing that His Majesty the King has my back.
More from the Prime Minister coming up as we find out about the unique way Bhutan measures its success. And we'll learn more about the idea the King has for a new mindfulness city. Bhutan is still facing problems in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic. Even though, as a nation, it limits how many visitors can come each year, the numbers are significantly down, and so too are jobs. The country has what it describes as a persistent problem with unemployment, especially with youth unemployment, those under the age of 24. The population is small, but around 1% are said to have emigrated to Australia, and the King made an unusual visit there in October 2024. It wasn't a state visit, but the Bhutanese population came out in their thousands to see the King. Those who've moved to Australia and work there get paid a lot more than they would in Bhutan. It's part of the allure for going there in the first place. Bhutan doesn't measure its success in the same way as other nations. It uses gross national happiness, G&H, rather than gross domestic product, GDP. G&H consists of 4 pillars: good governance, sustainable socio-economic development, preservation and promotion of culture, and environmental conservation. Now, with all of that in mind, the King has come up with an idea to create a new city in Bhutan, a mindfulness one. And We can learn more about that with the Prime Minister Tshering Tobgay.
So that future youth do not have to leave the country, and those who are working outside can indeed return. The Gain for Mindfulness City now is basically a city spread over 2,500 square kilometers. It is a biodiversity hotspot. It is a carbon negative city, perhaps the world's only carbon negative city. It is based on, located along the border with India. Huge prospects for education, health, well-being, longevity, sustainability, conservation. But in terms of spirituality, His Majesty the King is making it as a center, a hub for all schools of Vajrayana Buddhism. Because Vajrayana Buddhism is spread in many parts of the Himalayas, but they really don't have somewhere to call home. And this is what His Majesty is offering. And of course, technology, the green energy that we have, and finance, wealth management. This city is going to be really define the future of Bhutan, the future of gross national happiness. And this is going to benefit not just Bhutan, but also our neighboring countries, including India. It's called the Gain for Mindfulness City. Our kings, our monarchs, have always taken the happiness and well-being of their people very, very seriously. Way back in 1616, the founding father of Bhutan, the person who unified Bhutan, he was like a king. And he announced that if a government cannot create happiness for its people, the government does not deserve to exist. He made it very clear that the role of the government is to provide happiness to its people. And since 1907, our monarchs, our successive monarchs, have obsessed with creating happiness and well-being for their subjects. His Majesty the Fourth King, he ascended the throne in 1972, and he was 16 years old at that time. And a few years into his reign, he announced, well, actually it was to the world, because a journalist asked him, a foreign journalist asked him in a foreign airport, Your Majesty, what is the GDP? What is the economy of Bhutan? And His Majesty replied, for Bhutan, gross national happiness is more important than gross national product. And gross national happiness is really putting the happiness and well-being of the people in the center of the development agenda. Economic growth is important. There's no doubt about it. We must continue to focus on economic growth, but that focus must be balanced with a focus on social progress, on cultural preservation, on environmental conservation, and on good governance. So whenever His Majesty the King travels in the country, whenever any of our kings, past and present, travel in the country, and they do travel widely in the country, they visit every district, every village, every home. During these travels, if anybody wants a royal audience, you will be granted a royal audience. The motorcade will stop and ask why. The king will inquire why you need this audience. And the only reason people stop a motorcade and seek a royal audience is to seek His Majesty the King's personal intervention to sort out a problem. It could be that they don't have enough land. It could be that the government has not been taking certain issues regarding their land or finances properly. It could mean that their registration with the government had expired and the government is not renewing it for whatever reason. So this is the social progress part of gross national happiness. Today, we are a unique culture, and our kings, they are the fountainhead of our culture and our spirituality, which is absolutely unique in the world. During his coronation, His Majesty the King announced, I will never rule you as a king. I will protect you as a father, care for you as a brother. I will serve you as a son. I will keep nothing for myself. I will give you everything.
He seems very visible in Bhutan, but how much international travel does he do? I know towards the end of last year, he was in Australia because there is a significant Bhutanese population living in Australia. Around 1% of the population, I think, has immigrated there largely down to youth unemployment. But did he decide to go there, or do you advise that he goes there? How does that work?
Our kings have emphasized the happiness and well-being of the people, and the vehicle for this, the policy instrument, has been gross national happiness. And today, we are the victims of our own success, in that all our youth are educated, can speak a global language, are hardworking, are dedicated. And on the other hand, our economy, while it has grown by leaps and bounds in the last generation, has not been able to provide jobs that can compete with jobs that our youth can acquire elsewhere in the developed world. So many are leaving. And this, His Majesty has called an existential crisis. And so many go to Australia because they get paid a lot of money in Australia. And so I don't advise the king. His Majesty went to Australia because there are so many Bhutanese living and working there, missing their homeland. They want to know what's happening, and His Majesty took it upon himself to go to Australia, city by city, meet his subjects, and explain to them what's happening in Bhutan, how His Majesty the King is building the Gelufu Mindfulness City.
Well, I would love to visit one day, but Bhutan is one of the most difficult countries in the world to go to as a tourist, because I think I'm right in saying that you have a limit on how many tourists you allow into the country, and there is a tax per night of stay, which is quite high.
Daniel, we have room for one more. Don't worry. In fact, I would have loved to welcome you here and engage in this podcast with you here in Bhutan.
Well, maybe in the future I can come for a national celebration.
To visit as a tourist, you will have to pay a sustainable development fee of $100 per night. Our carrying capacity right now is determined to be at 300,000 per year. Right now, with the limited marketing we do, we are at only 150,000. So we have room to invite at least 150,000 more Daniels. Our population is only 700,000. Like I said, our culture is unique. Our landscape is unique. We rise from about 100 meters above sea level all the way up to 7,500 meters above sea level. We have the highest unclimbed mountain peaks in the world because mountaineering is banned in Bhutan, because we believe that our deities reside there. Highest unclimbed mountains. We have lush forests, rich in biodiversity, teeming with wildlife. We have a unique culture and spirituality. We consider ourselves the custodians of this gift that has been bequeathed to us by our kings. It is their policy, their wisdom, their foresight, their vision that has given us these assets. Our responsibility as custodians is to look after them, but also look after them for ourselves, our future, but also to share them with the world. Our only concern is that in sharing what we treasure with the world, we must not destroy it. When you come to Bhutan, Daniel, I want you to enjoy what you come here to seek. I don't want you to go back disappointed. And that's why our tourism policy is articulated as high value, low volume. So the value we give you must be very high. And the only way we can ensure to give you that high value is through low volume.
Prime Minister, that was fascinating. Thank you so much for speaking with me. And when is the next time you're seeing the King or speaking to him? And could you tell him that there's an episode of the It's Raining Men podcast all about him?
Maybe I should listen to it first. You will understand the significance of our king, the absolute love and reverence we have of our monarchy. Instantly, Bhutan has a unique distinction of having past king, present king, and a future king all living with us.
Well, that's three kings that could be listening to It's Raining Men right now, along with you. What a unique club. On the next edition, we're going to be looking at King Charles III, but not in his role as King of the United Kingdom. Instead, the episode will focus entirely on his role as Head of State of Canada. So if you have any questions, Our email is itsrainingmenpod@gmail.com. And if the King of Bhutan is listening, Your Majesty, there's 7 other episodes you can catch up on in the podcast feed, wherever you're choosing to listen. Thank you for listening to It's Raining Men. If you enjoyed it, please tell your friends who also might be interested in kings, queens, power and palaces. And it would be great if you could subscribe so more episodes appear in your feed as soon as they're ready. And if you want to suggest a topic to be explored or have any questions about monarchies or specific members of royal families, you can find us on social media. Just search It's Raining Men. There's also a weekly newsletter on Substack too. Speak soon.